Hey everyone, it's Blake, and welcome in to today's episode of the 411 on Wrestling Podcast. On today's episode of the podcast, we welcome back our friend Ian Hamilton from 411 to discuss the G1 Climax and kind of recap the biggest takeaways from this year's tournament. We also go into some of the individual storylines that are playing out moving forward as New Japan gets ready for the road to Power Struggle, and then of course Power Struggle will take place November the 7th. And also, after the interview, I go into some thoughts on WWE Hell in a Cell this weekend on Sunday and what we can expect from that show and some of the biggest matches on the card. So let's go ahead and jump into the conversation with 411's Ian Hamilton. All right, our guest today is Ian Hamilton, and of course we had him on before the G1 Climax and previewed all the action, and now we have him back on to review everything that took place from this year's G1. And Ian, hopefully you're getting to rest and catch up on other things, but as our listeners and our readers of 411 Mania know, you're still working on a lot of other things on the website.
Yeah, it's been a hectic month, to say the least, shall we say. G1, the collective weekend, it just never stops, and men being in the middle of a pandemic and stuff slowing down, sure as heck doesn't feel like it.
No, it doesn't at all, and there's lots happening in the wrestling world, as we know, and we're going to dive into the biggest takeaways from the G1, and we obviously have to start with the winner, Kota Ibushi, picking up his second straight win in the G1. Ian, what'd you think? Just of Ibushi being the one to come out on top here in this G1.
I'd picked a Okada Kenta final during all the pick'ems, post-wrestling, voice wrestling, what have you. So Ibushi going into the finals and even winning the whole thing, I guess it's one of those kind of New Japan things where you look at it and go, oh, you should have seen it coming. I mean, yeah, we had the free fall himself in pandemic, because of the pandemic, where he was tag team champion, lost it pretty soon after the restart. I would guess, quote, normal times, he would have lost that belt with tag titles pretty soon afterwards. But yeah, you had that. Felt like months, so it was probably only a few weeks. The New Japan Road Tour, I think it was, the New Japan Cup, where him and Tanahashi were getting beaten all over the place, lost the tag titles, didn't get them back, and then the team with Tanahashi split up. I think in hindsight, that was probably a massive sign that we all missed. I mean, it's been since 2003, 2004, since the last time we had back-to-back G1 winners, being the same guy. I certainly didn't think it was going to be Ibushi breaking that streak.
Yeah, I was right there with you. And like you said, maybe we should have looked at that a little bit more in terms of that potential story. But I thought it would be some of the others that you mentioned there. And, there were lots of people, of course, talking about Okada. You mentioned Kenta and, of course, SANADA. We'll talk about him in a second. But one of the things, you have a column going up on 411, and we're going to put that in the link here on the show notes as we always do. This is almost a scenario now for Ibushi, and, we remember how everything played out this year, earlier in the year at Wrestle Kingdom in terms of the double gold dash and everything, and it almost feels like, okay, this is that redemption step for him where it pays off and for him in terms of finally winning the title and maybe getting, again, that ultimate redemption story for Ibushi.
We've kind of had a similar thing with Naito. We had that story. Okay, it was over a much longer period of time, where he had, he had the main event, but then the fan poll put him into the semi-main event. He was very sour and bitter over that, as you'd expect. And he had that big payoff earlier this year that Kenta ruined. Okay, he finally got his fireworks at Jingu Stadium a few months back, but this to me feels like a much more condensed version of that story. Where you've got last year Ibushi won with G1, but he ended up being if you want to played like a mini league. He was fourth place out of the four guys from the tournament. Got his title shot on night one, lost. Had that unofficial third place playoff with Jay White on night two for Tokyo Dome, lost that. And my only concern, and we are 21st of October when we're recording this, we are good, 2 and a bit months out from the Tokyo Dome. Right now, there's been no rumblings at all of it being a mini tournament again. So. But what my big worry is it's going to be a situation where they maybe split the belts. Is this going to be Kota going just for that one big title that he has never held before, and then that's how you get out the double gold thing, which okay, we've had for a year, but I really don't think New Japan's been able to kind of harness the way they would have hoped.
Yep, agreed. And it's going to be interesting to see where they go with this, and it's also going to be interesting to see where things go for SANADA. He met Ibushi in the finals, and like you, I thought, there was some disappointment and some underwhelm, I think, from people in terms of SANADA in the final in particular. We wondered if this was going to be the next step for him, but I know a lot of people left disappointed in how everything played out at the conclusion of the tournament. I don't necessarily think, Ian, that this was probably the ending people wanted for SANADA, and I'm very curious to see where things go for him in terms of maybe being someone kind of at the level that he's at right now in New Japan. Does he, what's the next step for SANADA?
I think with SANADA, the big issue that you kind of had with him is, we've had this in the UK, he's been brought over a lot with Rev Pro. I mean, he had that run just after Royal Quest last year. He came back, stayed over, I guess, for the cockpit for like 2 days later, the next day. So Rev Pro's live cockpit's a tiny 150-seater building, but they ran monthly shows in. But he was the surprise name they held back. And I mean, for a while, we've seen, depending where you listen, like different tidbits of, they poll, Japanese wrestling fans en masse, and SANADA, Evil, Naito, Hiromu are some more popular names. So it's not surprising that New Japan are pushing SANADA to the extent they are. The problem that I would say with him, at least, is to a Western audience, it just isn't connecting, I would say. Like, you've got this situation with SANADA where he had that run as part of the tag team, with Evil, harmless enough, but they were really running out of steam. As a singles act, I mean, he's had flirtations with singles titles, but to me, this feels like it's the always the bridesmaid, never the bride kind of deal with him.
Yep, I agree, and it seems like the same situation for him. And then you look elsewhere, I guess, in this tournament, Okada, we come out of this probably with a much different spot than maybe we thought he would in terms of his storyline that he has moving forward. It was all about the Rainmaker, the money clip, and how he was winning his matches, and now he's set for a match, a power struggle with Great O'Khan. And so this was another, we talk about all these different individual stories that always play out in the G1. This was an interesting one for Okada.
I mean, look, Tomoyuki Oka, Great O'Khan, whatever name you want to call him, he's been out in New Japan since, I think the last time he was in a show in Japan was June 2018. I was actually present at the show in England when he started Excursion. They did it's a gimmick where Rev Pro, Strong Style Evolved. They did this gimmick where it was Shota Umino on night one and a guy called Danny Duggan on night two. They were New Japan's young line and Rev Pro's young line. Although Danny Duggan's done a lot more progress since, but that's by the by. And it was against Question Mark, and O'Khan came out, got absolutely no reaction at all. Like, it was more of a, who the hell is this guy kind of thing? Like, what is he? I mean, I think the big thing with that was, at the time, I know there was a little bit of rumbling that he was going to go away in Excursion, but there wasn't the big, like we saw with Ren Narita or Shota Umino, hey, I'm going away in Excursion, I need to better myself. It was a kind of, shuffle out the back door kind of thing. Like, I don't even think Oka even got like the grandiose farewell. Like we saw Kawato, now Master Wato had the farewell. Ren Narita, Shota Umino did after the Young Lion Cup last year. He kind of just shuffled off, popped up on Rev Pro shows in England. And I mean, I've seen a lot of this guy over the last 2 years, and what I will say with Great O'Khan, I don't know whether this is because the gimmick itself isn't very isn't going to connect very well with English fans. He is massively divisive. I mean, and also Rev Pro cockpit shows, he was pretty much a regular on those. And he, there was a guy, his manager in Rev Pro, Lord Gideon Gray, his big gimmick was doing ring introductions for him, proclaiming he's undefeated, just imagine in a lot more gravelly voice with veins bulging out of your head and you're kind of there. But that legitimately was his gimmick. Like, he, as it stands now, is one half of Rev Pro's tag team champions. Absolutely no idea how they're going to write out of this one, but he's now back in New Japan, teaming with Will Ospreay. And if you'd asked me back in September when we last spoke, Will Ospreay's going to get a faction. He's going to leave Chaos and go up against Okada. Great Khan would have been the absolute last name I would have picked. The other guy in this equation.
It's hard to disagree with that thinking about how it could play out, and that's what I was going to go to next. We went into the tournament, Ian, talking about the controversy surrounding Will Ospreay, and now, if you just look at it from an in-ring perspective, a completely different character for him coming out of this G1, and that's what I like about this tournament usually every year is, you do get different directions and ways you can build things after all of these matches that take place throughout this tournament. And that's certainly, I think, going to be the case here for Will Ospreay, who is definitely heading in a different direction in terms of the character that he is ready to seemingly take on here at this point moving forward.
I mean, there has been some degree of speculation, if you want to put it like that. The first match that they've got, I believe it's on Friday, is, Power Struggle is Great Khan against Kazuchika Okada. They're not doing Ospreay Okada because why on earth would they? That to me screams very high for Okada for Tokyo Dome. But this Friday they are doing at First Road Power Struggle show your usual build-up tag match of Okada and Ospreay against Okada and Gabriel Kidd. And there's quite a few people in the UK suggesting is this going to be Ospreay, grabbing various people in Britain to go on his side? To me, I honestly would be very surprised if they did that. I think it's second on the card at Corkin Hall on Friday. That to me seems way too soon. But at the same time, it makes sense. But how many more British people or people from the UK are around? I mean, supposedly at the start of the pandemic, all of the young lions went back to Japan, or in Hikuleo's case, back to the States. So in theory, Ren Narita and Shota Umino are back in Japan, but bear in mind, they literally just went on their excursion a year ago, far too soon, I think. You've also be plugged into that kind of thing, but it does keep questions going. They are looking to expand, and was that big debate during the G1? There was rumblings about the big faction reset, which thankfully they did not do at any point in the G1. We've not done a case of like the Raw and SmackDown draft, which we then went on to ignore. But some degree of change is always welcome. The factions I've been saying for a while had been getting stale for a long time. And Ospreay, I don't say love him or hate him because I personally am not a fan just of the Alpha Ring stuff. At least they are doing something different rather than he's yet another guy in Chaos.
There's a layer of unpredictability to some of this, and I think with Ospreay, he takes this forward trying to build his own empire, and I think that's something that obviously, people will have their eye on here to see what kind of comes to that and how he sort of builds this thing here, in New Japan as after this G1. So two of the guys, Ian, I wanted to talk about, they really stepped up and had some great performances. These are two guys that I've always loved, and I was really excited to see how things played out for them in this G1. Shingo and Taichi. In your ratings, I think Shingo had 3 of the top 6 matches in this tournament, and then with Taichi, the shtick, I guess, has gotten old for people at times with the shenanigans, outside interference, all that stuff. But this, I thought, was a big step for him going forward because he had some really good performances here, and I hope that's something that we see continue just in terms of maybe the evolution of Taichi's character there in New Japan.
I mean, you've got to think Taichi and Shingo until not very long ago were still juniors. So Taichi for me, now and again, I think a lot of people have probably noticed in the G1 and the COVID, if you want to call it that. There's been very little in the way of seconds, managers, valets, whatever you want to call it, that don't play part in matches. I think it's literally Edo for Jay White and Dick Togo for Evil. So you've not seen Peter, you've not seen Miho Abe with Taichi. And what's meant is that those guys like Taichi and Yujiro have had to cut all the shtick of their matches that involve them completely out. So this particular turn, you saw Taichi going to the timekeeper, grabbing the bell hammer, and doing all that kind of stuff. But it wasn't that and the talking that and using Miho Abe as a human shield kind of thing. And it was toned down. I think in the entire turn there was only one match that I would call of the old style of Taichi, which was ironically against Minoru Suzuki. But I think for a lot of people, Taichi's really opened a lot of eyes. I mean, the big question of him was never could he do it. The big question of him was always consistency. And okay, it's a G1, 9 matches. A lot of people can put a big effort on for a month and then go back the old way. So we'll see where he settles on that. With Shingo, much less of a surprise. I don't think it's been a case of can he do it. It's been a case of will they let him. Coming in from Dragon Gate about 2 years ago now, I haven't watched much Dragon Gate, but I know a lot of people whose opinions I trust and put a lot of stock in. Absolutely rave about him. And really, he's had a few flirtations with, he's been never titled briefly. But I do get the worry of it because of the age when he's come in, and also the fact that he wasn't in any way developed by New Japan. I've got a feeling there may be the proverbial glass ceiling on his career, which is a shame. But at least when we do get the matches, I mean, in the column we're going to be linking to, he had my joint highest match of the tournament against Okada on night 13, 4 3/4 stars. And a lot of it was very high, against Ospreay, against Kota Ibushi, which there's two guys if you can't have a good match with, there's something seriously wrong with you. But I think just in general, for a guy who I'd say doomed, but perhaps not likely to stay above the upper mid cards for any prolonged period of time, he knocked off the park to Shingo.
Yeah, he was great, and he's always someone that stands out. I have to watch him, no matter who he's facing. I say, all right, I've got to watch this match. And speaking of some other stuff that happened in this tournament, let's talk about the Bullet Club. Evil now set up for another match with Naito at Power Struggle. We didn't know where Jay White would fit into the mix due to being out for a while due to the pandemic. And now the big question, Ian, is what's the next thing for Bullet Club?
So if you look at the lineup for Power Struggle, I mean, not give away, much away. Evil and Jay White and Kenta all on my cards. Now, to me, I don't think they do a big bang at the moment, but one of the things that was announced during the G1, which caught me by surprise, is the tour that starts in mid-November, the World Tag League Best of Super Junior joint tour. So that's one where they're starting with a joint World Tag League and Best of Junior show on November 15th, then they're alternating. And then the finals, I believe it's in Budokan on December 11th, another joint show. But so they're clearly condensing World Tag League and Best of Super Juniors, which to me makes me wonder. Like when you look at the New Japan tag scene at the moment, there are very few regular tag teams. Even Zack Jr. and Taichi were, dare I say it, the classic WWE trope of take two singles guys we aren't using, put them in a team, there you go. Apart from that, you're probably going to be looking, and this is the way I'm expecting this, is for World Tag League, you're probably going to get 2 Bullet Club tag teams, whether it's, I don't know, Evil and Kenta, or Jay White and Kenta, and whichever, who starts the last man out to tag with Huge or something like that. And you have that friendly rivalry throughout the whole tournament. Maybe that's the final night match of the 2 Bullet Club teams together. The one of tight with Udron, lie down like we saw with Jay White in the tournament. Things blow up, and then it's been one big con all along and all that kind of thing. I think the fact that they are actually doing a World Tag League when, let's be honest, they absolutely don't need to, might be a bit of a tell. They may be saving the Bullet Club split for that.
That's something I hadn't even thought about, but yes, I mean, that's a way that it could play out. And you always get, those tiny aspects that could build into something, but we don't necessarily ever know where it's headed because we have to wait and see where it plays out, just based on, again, how many matches there are in this tournament, how many different stories you can kind of put into the mix. And I think New Japan always does a pretty good job of that with things like that. A couple other things here. We know match ratings are subjective. I try to say that as many times as I can. But I was right there with you in terms of the top 2 matches in the G1 this year. You had Tanahashi versus Naito on night 2 and Shingo versus Okada on night 13 as your top 2 matches. You rated those 4 3/4 stars. What stood out to you about those 2 matches in terms of maybe what made you feel like those were the best 2 that were in this tournament?
So I think start the first one, Tanahashi Naito. That was night 2. The G1 started with Blockade being real hot. Nothing fair to say. And I think one thing that we said going in was Blockade was going to be the worker show, Block B was going to be the storyline heavy one. Now, as it turned out, the Bullet Club that wasn't really the case. But I think with Naito and Tanahashi, you had that storyline baked in from Tanahashi's summer. Lost for tag team titles. He seemingly had his knee torn apart like tear and share bread for the entire summer because of Suzuki Gun. He even lost for tag team with Ibushi because Kota was just fed up of losing. And he had his one opportunity here to not be that fallen star, but the storylines paint as the whole summer long. This one we've had by the end of two, we had a lot of these matches which went really long. I mean, I lost track of the number of stories, the number of matches we had which were flat out teasing a time limit draw. I remember this fact Young Lions block which was doing them on the end. I think just put my report P there. Naito over Tanahashi in 27-16 was just the way that you didn't really have that feeling from the start of being, we've had a lot of these long matches was, they don't, even the final, which I know was very divisive. You had the first 5 minutes, they did literally nothing worse than miss. You had hesitation on that, but it didn't feel like, oh, we've got to do 27 minutes, we've only got 10 minutes of material, let's drag it out, wash, rinse, repeat, that kind of thing. But it genuinely felt like not quite Tanahashi's last hurrah, but certainly felt like a great big Hail Mary attempt from him to get back to where in his mind he thinks he is. And you've got to think only 2 years ago he won this whole tournament. So to go from winning the G1 in 2018 to where did he fit and where he finished now, just pulling up the last night for turn, but yeah, where he finished now, like he was in the bottom half of that table. That is very unusual for for Tanahashi to go from the peak, and I think he even won the title of Wrestle Kingdom that year, to so far out the picture. I mean, I'm looking at these cards for Power Struggle, and apart from that briefcase thing with Kenta, he's got nothing. If you imagine saying that 2 years ago, after Wrestle Kingdom 2019, you've won the big one. Well, now, yeah, you've got you're fighting for briefcase, but it's also being fought on a pre-taped show over in America. It's like that's a bit of a weird situation for old Tanahashi to be in.
It's interesting. Of course, the internet rumors, they always run wild. And I think the biggest thing that you see people talking about at this point in wrestling is, Tanahashi was on Jericho's anniversary show in AEW, and everyone's looking at the potential, New Japan AEW working relationship with Harold Mayout, and maybe people are wondering, could we get Moxley versus Tanahashi? Could we get some of these other matches that everyone wants to see? But, as we've said, with the restrictions in place, that's probably something that's going to be in the future if it happens, in terms of what the possibilities could be there. But it is something that I think a lot of people are looking at in terms of, what's next for New Japan, and people are looking at different possibilities like that.
But at the same point, I mean, I know not many people are watching it these days, but the NJPW Strong Show, there's a lot of that stuff in the can. They're also doing Kenta against David Finlay for the same briefcase. So have these two. I mean, it's almost like WCW back in the day, where you had some stuff in the can, some stuff sort of live. It would not surprise me if you had some kind of situation where Finlay won the briefcase but lost it straight back before this. I mean, it's very, very unlikely, but you've got the same quote unquote title in two different universes, one better word, at the same time. It's very unusual. I mean, to me, it's almost self-defeating, because I find this every G1, when you get towards the final nights, when you start looking at the whole permutation side of things, for some matches where it's like, well, if I think it's going into the penultimate B block show where one result in the main event would have wiped out the entire block. It's like, well, you're not doing two shows for nothing. You're not doing two shows where there's no stakes. Therefore, the main event of that night has to be this. And I'm just going to try and pull that particular result up, so I'm not keep myself honest. Yeah, the show we did on October 11th, they did things. It's the Evil Naito one, Evil Naito main event. And a lot of people are thinking, okay, Naito's going to win, but at the same time, if he did, it would have meant he would have won the block, and you would have had not only the debut show for New Japan in the new Yokohama Bunker Arena, But you also would have had the final night of B Block with players. Like, look, they do this intentionally. It's not a case of, oh, we're in this spot, oh, well, we need to do this, otherwise we're screwed. But it also means that when you get to this spot and you realise, hey, if this happens, we've got two shows that are meaningless, it does kind of kill a lot of the the drama and tension. I mean, yeah, maybe this is us overthinking things, but at the same point in a tournament like this, you do also, in the back of your own mind, keep running total of, if this happens, what happens next. So, yeah, maybe it's a quirk of the scheduling, but what also has led to, though, the Evil win over Naito means, unfortunately, we get yet another Evil Naito match at Power.
Yes, I think that's everyone's reaction that we're getting that again at Power Struggle. And of course, you'll be able to find coverage of all that on 411 Mania. But before we wrap it up, Ian, two quick hitters here I'm going to throw at you. Let's start with this. The most surprising thing for you coming out of this G1 was?
But we're getting Toru Yano against Zack Sabre Jr. for that goddamn trophy. It's not the first I was expecting that defense to be against, but here we go. I mean, by that point, we've got the Coke and Hall on Friday. Zack Sabre Jr. could be holding two titles and looking to leave with 2 bits of gold and a trophy, which, yeah, like I say, wasn't expecting Zack Sabre Jr. to be in that spot, but here he is.
I wasn't expecting that either, so that's a good pick. And let's go to most disappointing. It's hard to be disappointed, I think, with a tournament that gives you so many good matches, but what for you was the biggest disappointment in this particular G1?
I think coming out for G1, I mean, if you go by the whole pecking order kind of thing, we didn't have anybody really breaking out from their spot. Like, there was a few people expecting maybe this year Shingo would really push for spot. Well, in the end, he was 6 points off Ibushi in first place. You had, I had Kenta Downs winning. Okay, he was only 2 points off the lead, but still, he was so far gone by the end of the tournament. Like, I was literally thinking of, he's going to have to win this match, he's going to be no contest. Yeah, but it's a lost cause. And I do think with this, while we may have seen Tanahashi fall from the top into maybe the middle of the order, we didn't see anybody go the other way. And you look at the situation we've got now, where there's a lot of guys. I mean, the supposed speculations that the guys who are in Japan now, they're in at least Wrestle Kingdom, so we shouldn't be seeing too much change on the cards. But I think the fact that we are effectively still looking at the same kind of rosters we had maybe a year ago, minus all the imports. I think it's a bit of a missed chance to maybe try out a new name from this pack. So, I'm not saying you push maybe a Taichi for top of the card, but the fact that you had nobody break out from where they've always been. If you look at where people were in the G1 a month before the G1 to where they are now, maybe a slight shuffle ahead in the pack, but nobody's really broken out. I think for me, especially when right now you're selling out shows with reduced capacities, it felt like this is one where you really could have taken a chance on somebody and to see if stuff sticks to the wall.
That's a good point, and it does feel like lots of people are in the same spot. Maybe moving forward, we talked about guys like SANADA earlier, some of the guys who maybe finished in the middle of the pack and some of these. So, yes, I think that is a good point. But, Ian, this is always fun to catch up with you. And I know, as I've said many times, you've got a lot going on at 411 Mania with all your written work. So let everybody know where they can find all your work on New Japan, NXT UK, and all sorts of stuff.
Yep, so if you want to follow me on Twitter, I've literally just set up a new account because there's a lot of spring clean needed my old account, and it just felt better getting a new stuff. It said it was just my wrestling stuff. So you can follow me over at Ian Wrestling on Twitter. Guess the next few weeks, Rev Pro, they've got a new pay-per-view coming up. Well, was pay-per-view, it's going to be on Twitch this Sunday, so should be a review of that coming up. And also starting, the tournament starts Monday, but WXW, we go from one tournament into another. They're doing their new round-robin tournament, the Catch Grand Prix. That is starting Monday evening UK time on the WXW streaming service. They're releasing a match a day, so rather than flood the website, I'll be popping in every Sunday with updates on all the matches that's been on. There's, I believe, 14 names, two blocks of 7 in the tournament. And if you've been reading the shotgun reviews we've been doing, there's a lot of names there who you'd be familiar with. Cara Noir, who won 16 Carat Gold, pretty big part of the tournament. Avalanche, Bobby Guns, current WXW Unified World Champions in. So if you're into the European wrestling, WXW's Catch Grand Prix, that's going to be the big thing I'm seeing. In fact, this is going to be running for 7 weeks, starting October 26th until, I believe, mid-December. This is going to be around for a long while. So it's not going to be as intense as the G1, but a lot of matches coming out of this. So if you're into those kind of guys or even just interested at all, time to dive in.
Yes, for sure. And we will have the link to Ian's page in the show notes as always. And that's why I love it, Ian, is because you're able to review so many things. And that offers such a good perspective, I think, for people who don't get a chance to watch all this stuff. And of course, I always bring up the story about how, Larry was the one that got me into watching New Japan just by reading his G1 coverage many years ago and just going through and saying, wow, I clearly need to watch this. And that's something I always think about because there are a ton of people out there that haven't seen this stuff. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that didn't get a chance to watch the G1 all the way through this year because time-wise, we know, there's a lot of wrestling out there and being able to keep up with it all is not an easy thing to do. But I think having all these different reviews, it gives you an idea of what else is out there. And especially, I think, in today's era where you have so many different options, you can read the reviews, ones like yours, and say, okay, well, clearly, these are some of the things I need to at least maybe keep my eye on. Even if I don't have a chance to watch it right now, it's definitely something I kind of want to bookmark there and say, okay, I want to try to catch this in the future as a wrestling fan that's always looking for good wrestling.
Like right now, the Top Up Collective weekend, that was 2 weekends ago coming up. We had 12 shows over 3 days. That took full week to watch. Okay, you could have, if you watched it live and all that, you could have done it live perfectly fine. But if you were trying to, obviously with G1 and real life around it, there is a lot going on. And I never understood how on earth Larry could do it. Plus you had your Raw, SmackDown, TNA, pretty much everything on there. And to me, I always find, right up stuff you love watching, and if you just convert one person into it. I'm not saying convert like it's a cult, but if you're writing my reviews to get anyone into, say, WXW or Rev Pro, or when it comes back Progress or whoever, then it's a new fans, new set of eyes, and who knows where that can go.
Absolutely. So check out all of Ian's stuff. And again, Ian, thanks as always for joining the show, and look forward to catching up with you again here soon.
Absolutely. All the best, Blake.
Thanks again to 411's Ian Hamilton for joining us on the podcast. And again, be sure to check out all of Ian's work over at 411mania.com. The links and everything will be in the show notes on that, so be sure to check all that out. But before we wrap up, let's talk about WWE Hell in a Cell, which is something a lot of people are going to be tuned into on Sunday, and we look at that. We know 4 matches as I'm recording this. I'm sure there will be more added to it, but I think we already know what the main featured matches are going to be at this event. And so let's start off with talking about Roman Reigns versus Jey Uso, which will be an I Quit match inside Hell in a Cell. And if you listen to my Clash of Champions review, you know what I think about where things stand with Roman Reigns right now. This story, to me, is one of the best things going in wrestling, and if you made the argument that it is the best thing going in wrestling, I would not have much of an argument to disagree with that, because I think they've done a fantastic job with Roman Reigns. Obviously, if you go into this match, you're going to expect him to come out the winner, but I think what's made it so great is that, even with the predictability of Roman Reigns winning that match at Clash of Champions and probably going to be winning this match at Hell in a Cell, it's not about, waiting to see who wins or who loses. It's about seeing how it's done. And because they did such a great job doing that at Clash of Champions, I think everyone is pretty much hooked now to say, all right, I want to see how this plays out. I know Reigns is going to win this match, but how does this play out? How does it add to that next chapter of the story? Because Reigns has just been fantastic. But I also think you can't take anything away from Jey Uso, because he's been just as important to this whole thing with the way he's played, kind of the role that he's played in this storyline. And so I think we have to remember that. As great as Reigns is, you have to give some props to Jey Uso, because he's been really good here in terms of playing the character he has to play to help Reigns get over. And so I think you give both of these men a lot of credit for what they've been able to do, and I have no doubt that they will continue that here because Reigns has taken it to another level, as we know, and I'm very fascinated to see where things go from here. and I fully expect this to be another one of those matches that is must-see just to see how the character development continues for Roman Reigns and what he's capable of inside a cell in an I Quit match. There are lots of possibilities, I think, in terms of taking that character up another notch, and that's going to be fun for sure. Drew McIntyre defends his title against Randy Orton. This one will also be inside of Hell in a Cell. I go back to Clash of Champions, and I remember specifically one thing I said was, this is probably the blow-off for this, when you have an ambulance match, when you had all the legends come back and sort of get their revenge on Randy Orton. But they drag this forward now to Hell in a Cell, and I don't think this program necessarily has the same type of heat it had a couple months ago. Again, because I think this is a scenario where WWE paints themselves into a corner with these gimmick pay-per-views where you have, an entire pay-per-view built around a gimmick match to where, all right, it's really hard to just throw a new feud together and put it into Hell in a Cell. So I think that's kind of WWE booking themselves into a corner because you probably didn't need to go back to Drew McIntyre versus Randy Orton after you had the ambulance match, after really the way the story was told in that match, to where it seemed like basically a send-off for Orton in this feud, and Drew McIntyre was ready to move on to bigger and better things. If you don't have Hell in a Cell on the schedule, my guess is you probably go to something completely different. But they're like, okay, we can't start a feud and just throw it into a cell. You can't have McIntyre go directly into a cell with a new challenger probably. But maybe that's why they continued that here. I do think this one is certainly not as clear-cut in terms of who wins this match. I can't say I would be shocked if Randy Orton won the title here, but I also think it's a scenario where it's really hard to tell after the draft because there are obviously more possibilities you can go to with different people on the roster, but I would not be shocked if Orton won the title here. The betting odds still favor Drew McIntyre if you like to look at the betting odds for WWE, but I'm sure this will be a good match, but like I said, I don't necessarily know that it's one that necessarily needed to be put here at this point. I think they probably could have ended it, with that match at Clash of Champions. But again, it's just a matter of the schedule and knowing that you had to have a Hell in a Cell match and you wanted to certainly have Drew McIntyre, your champion, on the card against someone. I guess it does make sense just to go back to Orton, although I think they could have probably been a little bit more creative in terms of what they did, but, it's just a matter of having this pay-per-view, and I think that's something that many people have brought up throughout the years, is when you have these gimmick pay-per-views that are built around these matches, sometimes you have to put matches together that, just to make somewhat sense, I guess. And I suppose that's what they tried to do here with this one. But I just think, having pay-per-views built around these matches is not always a good thing. It's a spectacle. It's different. But when you have so many of these matches, it just sort of takes away the overall significance of it, just based on, does it feel special? And I think when you have so many of these matches, it doesn't necessarily feel special anymore. But we will get those two inside Hell in a Cell, and we'll also get a third Hell in a Cell match with Bayley defending her title against Sasha Banks. And now, if you're talking about a match that deserves the Hell in a Cell, I think this one could certainly warrant it because, as we know, this had a slow burn storyline that has played out for a while, and this is one that kind of is made for Hell in a Cell, and that's what we say. It's when you have this pay-per-view. Let's say, for instance, if you just had this to where it's October. If you go back in WWE history, the October pay-per-view used to be No Mercy. If you just had this pay-per-view called No Mercy right now, would this just be a potential scenario where, okay, you don't have to put all these matches in Hell in a Cell, but guess what? You can bring out the Hell in a Cell, you can put Bayley and Sasha Banks in it, and you've got your spectacle right there, because that in and of itself would just be something. But because there are so many other matches on this card that have the same stipulation, maybe it doesn't feel as special. But either way, I think we know what we're getting here. This should be really fun. I know there were some rumors that this could be the match that main evented the show. I guess we'll see, but overall, I just think this is one that was made for Hell in a Cell, because we've seen how this is all played out with these two going from best friends to now, complete enemies. and I think it's a scenario where you're probably going to see Sasha Banks win the title, snap Bayley's long streak, but that would be something I think that would really play well to the story. And this is just one, I said it, at Clash of Champions. I've talked about it on this podcast before. I just think they've done such a good job with these two and how they built up, that friendship, how they built up them basically dominating WWE basically throughout this entire pandemic era. And then you had the turn, and now you set it up for this match at Hell in a Cell. So I'm just really looking forward to this one. I think this could be one that certainly, as much as I love Roman Reigns, and I think that he'll probably be the talk of this coming out of it, I also think that in terms of just what we could get from Bayley and Sasha, it could be really great for sure. And then Jeff Hardy and Elias also on the show. We had Elias, of course, make his comeback recently. He's promoting his new album, and now Jeff Hardy is the next one in line for him. The betting odds, again, I'm always fascinated by the betting odds for WWE pay-per-views, but Elias is currently the betting favorite, so we'll see. This is another one that kind of came together, pretty quickly. It's a little bit different than the others, where you've had feuds that have been going on for several months. This one came together pretty quickly, but this is another one where I think you bring Elias back, you put him in the spot. I assume he probably gets the win here since you just brought him back, and maybe you're trying to build him towards something. You don't know exactly what that's going to be, but this, it's another where I think you look at it, and Jeff Hardy's kind of in that role now to where, I don't necessarily see Jeff Hardy being in a situation where he's challenging for world titles or anything like that, but he's someone that they're going to put in there to work with some of these guys, with the younger guys, and maybe some of these other potential storylines you could go to with him. But this is another one. Should be a solid match, but luckily it will not be inside Hell in a Cell, so should be a solid match though there between those two. But those are the 4 matches that we know right now as I'm recording this. Again, there'll be more added to it, but it should be a fun pay-per-view. I mean, as much as I talk about Hell in a Cell and saying that obviously it's just different to have so many different Cell matches on the same show, it takes away that level of uniqueness I think that obviously you used to have with Hell in a Cell. You'll still get some good quality here. I can't deny that. And as much as people have a hard time maybe watching a show like Raw right now, which I'm just going to admit, myself included, it's really tough. But I think once you get to these pay-per-views, you at least certainly feel like you're getting mostly matches. You're getting the stories that should be on these pay-per-views, and maybe don't have a lot of that other stuff that's sort of dragging it down. That maybe people aren't as thrilled with in WWE right now. But the top 3 matches here are all strong, and they should all deliver, I think, in a really big way on this show. So there's some thoughts on Hell in a Cell. Of course, also this weekend, it's a jam-packed weekend in wrestling. Bound for Glory takes place on Saturday. Impact Wrestling has really been, and I think we sort of talked about this probably on the podcast we did with Steve Cook several weeks ago. Impact has been a show that has been a lot better maybe than people think, and I think there's sort of maybe that scenario where you look at it and it was easy at one point, because of all the wrestling that was out there, to kind of throw Impact behind some of the others and maybe not ever have a chance to watch it. But I'll tell you, this has been a really, I think, improved product that they've had over the last little while, and I would highly recommend checking out Impact and maybe catching up on what they've been doing. And certainly, I mean, if you want to just jump right into it, order Bound for Glory, because I think you'll probably get your money's worth. This should be a pretty good show. A headline with the Impact World Title match between Eric Young and Rich Swann. You've also got 3 other titles defended on the show. Deonna Purrazzo defends the Impact Knockouts title against Kylie Ray. You've got the Tag Team Championship match, Motor City Machine Guns taking on the North, the Good Brothers, and Ace Austin and Madman Fulton. That should be a fun 4-way match there. Then you've got the X Division title on the line in a 6-way match. Moose versus EC3. Ken Shamrock going to be taking on Eddie Edwards. And then you've got the Call Your Shot gauntlet match, which is going to be a unique setting, that's for sure, in terms of this gauntlet match and all the different participants that will be in this thing. So I think it's a really good-looking card. I think it's one, like I said, if you want to just maybe jump into Impact Wrestling and kind of give yourself a better idea of what the product looks like right now, this would be a good starting point, because I think you're going to get some good quality here. And, it obviously helps to kind of go back and check out the stories that have built to a show like this, which we know kind of where Bound for Glory is for Impact Wrestling. I mean, it's a huge show. It's the biggest show. And so I would go back if you have a chance to maybe catch up on it, watch a couple episodes of Impact here for the past, several weeks, month, however much you can get to before Bound for Glory, but would highly recommend checking out that show, because as we talked about with Ian too, there's just so much good wrestling right now, and I know, and that's one of the things I brought up, is it's hard to get to it all, but if you just go out and sort of seek out what you can outside of maybe the top ones, which we know, I mean, WWE, AEW, they have the weekly television. They're the ones that are getting the most attention. But when you look at Impact, when you look at Ring of Honor, it still has the Pure Tournament going on, New Japan, which we talked about in this episode. There's just so much good wrestling out there. And, of course, the pandemic has limited a lot of different things. But now that we're starting to see some of these promotions maybe get back to running regularly and trying to pick things back up, there's a lot of good wrestling out there, and there'll be a lot of good wrestling this weekend with Hell in a Cell and Bound for Glory. So check all that out. But, of course, also check out everything going on at 411mania.com. We've got a lot of stuff happening over there. And, again, be sure to check out all of our live coverage of all these events that we mentioned here. Talk about Hell in a Cell, Bound for Glory. You can check out everything on there. If you want the AEW coverage, we've had, of course, our new Dissecting Dynamite post show on YouTube. I had the opportunity to join Andy Perez on the first episode of that. Our friend Tony Acero joined him on the second episode, so catch up on those that you may have missed. And we've got a lot of other stuff on YouTube now, some great content that we have. We've got the new Wrestle Takes Mania show. That's a fun one. You can check out there with the guys, with Joe and Eric. Be sure to check that out. Their first episode is up. You can check that out on the 411 YouTube channel. Also, My Big Break, another series we have. Big Swole, who is, of course, in AEW. She was the first guest on that and talked about a lot of different subjects there. So check out all the great stuff. I mean, again, we're really starting to ramp up some of the things we're doing from a video standpoint. And, of course, here on the podcast, we've got some fun ideas that we have coming up here for the podcast as well. So lots of good stuff. If you want to read, you can read all at 411mania.com. If you want to watch, you can watch it all on the 411 YouTube channel. And if you want to listen, you can find that here on the 411 on Wrestling Podcast and our 411 Interviews podcast with Jeffrey Harris. So you can check all that out. And again, here on the podcast, be sure to subscribe. Any podcast app you use, you can find it on there. And as always, we do have the link to the GoFundMe for Larry Zonka's family still in the show notes. So continue to share that if you can. And thanks as always for listening. Be safe. And we'll talk to you guys next time here on the 411 on Wrestling Podcast.